Hello, everyone. Probably you can hear the wind behind me. I cannot tell you how miraculous this last week has been. Being in Mallorca, being surrounded with human beings, being able to touch each other without freaking out, being outside and being able to share love and light has been a real gift after this 1 year of being in this tunnel that we've all been in. I want to thank Lee and Philippe for taking the risk and coming out on this adventure with us of doing this absolutely improvised as we're doing under a tree in Mallorca. Why under a tree? Because this is 100-year anniversary of Tagore. Tagore's beautiful school, which is Shantiniketan. And Tagore said that if we want to learn something, we need to go out into nature. And he wanted to build classrooms under trees. And that's always kind of, in my heart, that's had a big place. So here we are under a tree talking about new ways of looking at the world. Mallorca, why Mallorca? A lot of people ask me, why Mallorca? Why did you guys pick Mallorca? Well, because we were always looking for a place where there was textile tradition, and Mallorca has the telares de Yengua, which is a kind of ikat, which is ancient, and they don't even know how long ago it was brought here and who brought it here. There's lots of theories, and in fact, there's work being done by the island people to try to turn this into patrimonial textile for the world. But also why Mallorca? Because I don't know if any of you like Robert Graves. I'm a huge fan of Graves. I'm all about myths and mythology. I think we human beings, whenever we want to change something, we need to, somebody's asking us to share the speaker's name. My name is Kavita Parmar. We want to tell ourselves new stories. And I think as we go into this new world, as Lee very well said, this World Hope Forum that she's in her mind envisioned, opposite to the World Economic Forum. This World Hope Forum is about storytelling. It's about new stories that are going to help us, give us hope as humanity, and get rid of this noise that we have, which seems like if you're on one side, everything's one way, if you're on the other. We are going to be able to see that there's diversity and there's diverse stories around the world, but at the end of the day, as human beings, we all connect the same way. I remember reading that Robert Frost was going through a very hard time in his life, stuck as a writer, and at one point he meets Gertrude Stein, and Gertrude says to him, go to Deya in Mallorca and you will find yourself. And I'm hoping that we all who came here to the island, and those who've been coming to the island, because this island is full of absolutely fascinating human beings who at some point or the other made a decision to come here and find themselves, and as they find themselves, find new ways. There's some absolutely exciting projects, some of which we will hear today, other projects that are related to the island. And that's why we thought the island was a perfect place to start. In many ways as well as humanity right now, with all that's happening, I feel like we need to understand in the universe, Gaia, this planet we're on, it is an island. We still haven't found intelligent life anywhere. I'm sure it's probably more intelligent than us when we do finally find it. But for the moment, here we are alone on this pale blue dot, and we want to make sure that all of this is we are all aware of the fact that we're all in this together, and this island kind of makes you feel that way. So before I get started on why we decided to do this here, yeah, that's better. You guys get to see my beautiful tree in the back. Why we decided to do, like I said, in Mallorca, and what we're doing here and what this is about, as Lee said. What I'm going to do is go back, because we always said, Marcella and I, it's when you move forward, it's looking back to move forward. So I'm going to go quickly back to my origin story and why and how I got here, because I think that always gives you an idea of why one finds yourself in a space. So I'm going to share my screen and show you a little bit of that. My whole story starts that I, by sheer dumb luck, started to work in the clothing industry. And as I started to work in the clothing industry, and this is sheer chance, I ran away from home. The first job I found was in the industry. I was I was literally embraced by the industry. As I do this, I have no knowledge of it. And I actually come into it with thinking, what a banal industry. Because what I was looking as a 16-year-old was like most 16-year-olds trying to change the world. I wanted to be like Che Guevara, like everyone else, get my jacket and go fight a battle. That wasn't mine. And as I find myself thrown into this industry, as luck would have it, I start working with an artisan group. And I had no idea about artisanship, of course. I grew up in the West, even though I'm from India. And my relationship with clothing was very similar to what other people, young girls' relationship with clothing was, probably. I bought things because of the brand. I wasn't really so when I get to this industry, which I've totally madly fallen in love with, and as I fall in love with this industry, what I do realize as I'm working is there is an absolute shift in the artisanal work is replaced by industrial work. And at the first time when you see it, it seems like a good idea because, you know, the artisans were making very little money. They're getting into work in factories, which are in most cases even cleaner than where they worked, air conditioned, good situation, and even sometimes making $50 more than they were making as a craftsperson. But the truth of the matter is, in the long term, I start to see very quickly how that work is dehumanizing. That in reality, these artisans who are free human beings who basically their relationship with work is completely different, which is they could get up and do their personal work whenever they wanted. They could get up and get their children from school. It was a much more relaxed environment. They go into an environment which is very strict, about 8 hours or sometimes 12, sitting at the machine, repeating the same task over and over again. And you could see the loss of joy and the loss of happiness for the same people doing similar work. And this is something that got repeated all over the world wherever I went. In the beginning, I started my career in Hong Kong. Very quickly, Hong Kong became too expensive. Things started to move. We had to move. I was working in a company that was looking for production. And we moved very quickly to Southeast Asia, other countries like Dhaka, like Sri Lanka, India, Dubai. We were sort of like crazy people trying to find cheap production. That was our only focus. Of course, I'm not going to bore you guys with, and all of us here, it's like preaching to the choir about the human rights situations that I saw firsthand. I'm not going to bore you about the issues with you know, the climate change issues that I saw. I remember working many, many years ago, going to Tirupur, which is in the south of India, which became very quickly the hub for making all the t-shirts on the planet nearly. It was like the #1 t-shirt producer. 10 years later, as I'm working there, no longer could you drink the water. There were huge amount of cases of cancer that were going up, and all because of the quality of, you know, pesticides that were being used to get the best hand feel, to get the right colors so that they match the color of the season. So this is something I've watched firsthand as I've grown up in that part of the world, looking for production for different people. What I also saw was a complexity of the supply chains. We had, you know, from very simple where you'd make something, take it to a retailer and sell it as an artisan designer. It became a much more complex system, much more industrial system, where many times the people who actually were making the product didn't really know anyone in that chain besides the one right next to them. Of course, the customer didn't know any more about that product except the fact that it was the name of the brand or the designer or the shop they were buying it from. And as far as the manufacturer, many of times they didn't even know who was the final consumer, of course, who was buying the product. And I'm not going to even tell you about going back into fiber, going back into, you know, making the product, making printing. There were so many different parts to this process. No one knew no one except the ones right next to each other. And the relationship with all of them was very transactional. Most of the time, the relationships were not long-term relationships because our industry is based on quick change, and that's what it was all about. So we were always looking for the new thing on the block. What happened? Fashion, that was a language. That was the way we as humanity, you just talk about who we are. Clothing at the end of the day has always been part of our identity. In the beginning, as a tribe, we dressed in a certain way to let other people know which tribe we're from. Later on, as time goes on, humanity becomes a big global village. And if you look at the 1920s and the way women dress, so you look at the 70s or 60s, why the so-called hippie movement, the DIY comes in. All of this has to do with the social movement that was happening. In the 20s, the women's suffragette movement makes women think about who they are and about relationship with their own bodies. So they don't want to be corseted. They start to cut their hair. They start to wear short dresses. They don't want their body shapes. They want to be in control. That's what fashion reflected. When you go into the 60s and 70s, you've got the famous picture of Earth from space. That was the first photograph that was taken of planet Earth from the outside. And this pale blue dot, as Carl Sagan said, that photo had such a huge impact on humanity because that photo made us realize, oh my Lord, we are all alone, all of us on this very fragile little dot in the middle of nothing. And we really have no other plan and no other place to go. And I think that, you know, there's a beautiful magazine that was started, which was called the Whole Earth Catalog. A lot of the environmental movements got started at the time. Rachel Carson wrote The Silent Spring. There was a huge movement of environmentalists. And why? What does that reflect? The way people start to dress. We start to use tie-dye. We start to wear our hair loose. Fashion has always been this language in which we tell other people who we are, and we also reflect what's happening to around us at that moment. But for the past 25 years, if you were to look at it, that's nearly disappeared. I think the most honest thing that I can remember that happened was probably the grunge movement, the Nirvana. That after that, things have become like as if we're in a repetitive, ever-looping move. You know, we're looking back, but we're not trying to find who we are at this moment. It feels like as humanity, we're lost. We've lost our narrative. All we try to do, and all the, you know, magazines push at us is, oh, the 70s are back again, or the 60s are back again. So it's all about going back and trying to find something, but not being present in this moment and reflecting who we are. And of course, for the industry, to be present and to reflect needs time. And the industry had become so fast. It was all about faster and cheaper and faster and cheaper. And the only focus we had was price and quantity. You know, our success stories were success stories that talked about how big something was, how huge they had become, how many number of factories or how many number of, you know, shops that had been opened. It was not about how beautifully it was made, how long a time it took, or how long it would last. We as humanity had gotten into a race to the bottom. And, you know, with races to the bottom, you'll eventually get there. And I'm hoping that we finally hit bottom last year. In some way, and I know it's so hard when one says this, I feel like COVID was, you know, Earth being gentle with us as a mother and stopping us, like as if we were running to the edge of the precipice, and Earth just grabbed us and pulled us back before we actually killed ourselves. It was a warning sign. Stop. Don't go down that road. And if we as humanity do not heed this incredible, miraculous, and I know it's hard to hear that because we've all been, it's been such a hard year for a lot of us. We've lost our loved ones. A lot of us have lost our jobs. It's been full of anxiety. We don't know what is happening. We've been shut down in our homes. It's been a hard year, but at the same time, I think it's a year that's allowed us to go inside, to reflect and to inhabit the time that we're living. You know, as a designer, I've always sort of looked up at certain people. When you look around you, there's people who have great jobs, and, you know, Alexander McQueen or, you know, Ralph Simmons. There have been some amazing humans around me as I was working on being a designer that I looked up to and thought, wow, I'd love to have that job. I'd love to have that incredible atelier where I can do these amazing things. And then I look at them, these people who I was so envious of, and they were just not happy. And you kind of think, why? How could someone who had the perfect atelier, the amazing job, why are they not happy? And at the other side, all of us, every time I went to a trade fair, every time I went to the fabric fairs, all my friends in the industry, they were all having the same conversation. I'm tired, I'm exhausted, this is not fun anymore, we're not enjoying ourselves. These conversations were constant, and they were not just me, it was everyone I spoke to. We had so much, but it wasn't enough. It was never enough. And then the other thing that I noticed as I moved here to Spain was that I came here in the year 2000. I fell in love. I came here for love, and I made it home, and Spain embraced me. I started my brand here, and I was working very quickly with over 200 stores around the world, amazing little shops, mom and pop stores that were very personal, where it was the individual who had a relationship with, who was curating for people around them. Business grew really quick. It was a really great time to be in Europe, European Union, European new money was coming. But what I did notice was all around me, all the little factories that I was working with were all shutting down. And it wasn't because they were not doing a great job. It wasn't because they were not innovating. It was really because they were not cheap enough. It was as if their bowl of rice, of course, was a little bit more expensive than the bowl of rice that's anywhere else in the world. And everyone around me, and all of us, and even there was so much pressure on me to move to another place to find cheaper ways of production. How many times was I told, you're from India, why don't you produce far away? What I was doing was I was going all over the world where I had relationships with artisans who made fabrics, and I brought them to Europe, and I was producing with the best European factories. And everyone thought I was a little crazy doing that, because when I went to the factories in the Far East, what I did see was, yes, there was a lot of work, something that was missing here, but what there was abuse. Abuse sometimes given as a we're giving them work. The attitude that I found in people was like, look at them, they were really poor now, and look, now we're giving them work. If we didn't give them work, where would they go? I've got news for all my friends who haven't been living in the East. We were really well off before the West came and gave us this work. We much rather have the work that we had before. Please don't come and save us. Let us save ourselves, and you can go save yourselves. And that's something I have repeatedly, and of course, because I inhabit two skins, mentally, and my world I inhabit is this world. I grew up in the West, but I look like, I am an Indian, my DNA is India. So when I go there, that's my world as well. And so I'm this disconnected person who lives, a dichotomy, living in two different worlds. And that's something that made me realize what was going on, that we had two narratives coming at each other, which were very, very different. I'm going to hold this in my hand because I'm getting like this really weird noise, and you're going to see me do something strange, but I think it's going to be better for everyone here. So I have to make you happy, and I have to make all these wonderful humans happy as well. So that's something that really shocked me, that it was, yes, we had a lot of work, but it wasn't the work that we wanted. There was lack of work here, and there was lack of laws and rights over there. What had we exported here from the West? We had exported what we didn't want, which was bad quality work that was hard to do, work that we here, our grandparents and our parents had fought for minimum wage, quality of life, and we just pushed all of that down there, saying it's better for them, and we're doing them a great favor. And on the other side, they were just being shoved this horrible work and being told that this is progress. This is how they were going to get to who we were. What we had created was a monster. And I look at myself in the mirror and I realized what I had become was that monster. I was part of this horrible charade where we were telling these two stories that were parallel to each other, that were lies. It was a lie what was going on here, and it was a lie what was going on there. And it was time that someone pointed to the elephant in the room. And the only way to do that was transparency and traceability. We had to stop being irresponsible. Everybody knows human rights, and everyone had forgotten human responsibilities. I think it was a time that as humanity, we sat down together and we wrote our Bill of Responsibilities. Because, it's really great that we have a Bill of Rights and we fought really hard for it. But if we do not have our Bill of Responsibilities, there's no one who's going to come from up top to try to give us the rights. Every time we've had someone come and tell us a story that they're going to solve all our problems, this ended quite badly. So I think we've got to all realize that we are the ones, we're all here, and as a great, I don't remember who said this, but I love it. It says, we are here on spaceship Earth, and everyone is crew. No one is here as a passenger. And at the same, when I start to talk around me, of course, I'm not the only one. There's a lot of people having this realization and having this conversation. And everywhere I went, whether it was America or Europe or even Asia, I always found people who were talking about how they wanted to do something different. And there was a lot of different ideas around sustainability that were happening. There were people who were doing recycling. There were people who were wanting to make locally. There was people who were wanting to do all organic, try to use natural fibers. So there's been a lot of different conversations. And I'm talking to you back in 2008, when this was just the beginning of all of it. One of the things that I, who've lived in Asia, saw, and it was really dramatic for me to see, was how consumption, when it moves exactly the way it is over to those numbers, it gets quite scary. This picture that I've put up for you guys, this is not a row of tulips from Amsterdam. These are thrown away bikes. Before, in China, every individual had their own bicycle, and they took care of it. As I lived and traveled in Hong Kong and all over China, producing there, I remember how the bike was such an important thing for everyone, because it was their modes of transportation. That's how they got to work. They really took care of it. And as this experiment happened in a city in China, where the government said they were going to put free bikes, rent a bike, this is what happened very quickly. When something doesn't belong to us, or we think it doesn't belong to us, we don't take care of it. All we care about is what we think belongs to us. And of course, this incredible pile, the numbers of that. When a mistake happens in Europe, we could probably still do something about it. But when you take these numbers to China, to India, it's quite scary, because it's incredible how quickly things can go wrong and become dramatic. What has happened is, what I realize and what all of us realize is, our industry, which seems like, and many times I talk to people and they ask me, what are you in? I'm in fashion. And they say, oh, I'm not interested in fashion. And I say to them, I don't see anyone naked. I don't see you naked. If you're wearing clothes, you've got to be interested in fashion and clothing, because the impact that our industry has is scary. Our industry is affecting everything. I mean, we can argue about whether it's number 1, number 2, number 5 of the most polluting industries in the world. I don't care about those numbers. But the fact of the matter is that we are touching every single other industry, whether it's food, because it's related directly. A lot of what we produce comes from agriculture, the air pollution, the destruction of habitat because they're cutting down trees to produce more cellulose, the human rights abuses. I mean, I could go on and on and on. Every year, I don't know which month it's going to be this year, but I think unfortunately it's going to be June, we as humanity are running out of our resources, our renewable resources, a month in advance. That's crazy. After July, we are going to be using the resources of the future. And I think it's time to stop. I think we cannot allow that to happen. And I'm going to, copy Greta Thunberg when it says it's an emergency. The house is burning, and I think we need to do something about it. The other thing that I lived with and I saw all the time was, as I traveled back to these artisan communities, many times I would find a buyer who would love what I was making, and they'd come to me and say, oh, I love it. We'd love to do a lot of it. And they'll do a lot of it for that season. And then after that, it's done and they're on to the next thing. And the artisan community has scaled up to be able to supply the demand, and the next season they don't have enough. And so the artisan communities were getting absolutely destroyed because they can't deal with this fluctuation of demand. They are not good at it. They're about slow and long term. Their planning is that way. That is the way they think, these indigenous communities. So what did the industry start to do? Oh, they're not consistent. We can't get good quality. So I'm just going to go get something that looks like that and then give it to Italy. I'm not even going to talk about the bad, the fast fashion brands, because that's their business model. That's what they do. They copy, and they're very upfront and outright about it from the very beginning. But these are brands that I know are wonderful human beings. I've met Isabel, and I know for a fact that Karl Lagerfeld didn't want to do this. But when you're in a system, it's not about what you want sometimes. It's the way the system's been engineered. This thing that happened with this blouse of Isabel Marant that got copied from a Mexican design wasn't because they couldn't afford to pay this Mexican group to make this product. It's just that the way our fashion industry works, how quickly we need the production, it wasn't enough for the production team of Isabel Marant to actually produce with them. So what do? They take a blouse, they go to Italy, and they produce it, and probably at the same price, a little bit higher even, but it's more consistent and they can get it faster. So once again, it doesn't matter what they were doing. They were playing the same game that everyone was playing. What we were doing with traditional artisanship, we were using them as our mood boards, and we were using their craft and their knowledge just to inspire, but we were not investing in them. And that's something I've seen repeatedly all over the world. So, and the other thing that really bothers me as a global citizen, as someone who says, someone said to me once, where are you from? It's always been hard for me to answer that question. I always say there's people who are from somewhere and then people from everywhere. And I think I'm the everywhere person. I don't know where I'm from. And I feel like wherever I am right now, I feel very Mallorquin. When I'm somewhere, I feel very much from there. I'm lucky enough that I have this sort of realization this planet that we live on is so amazing and magical that all of it belongs to me. And I'm responsible for it. It's home. But what also bothered me was every time I started to travel, everyone everywhere started to look the same. And I'm sure a lot of you, when you travel, you bring back things which are your bookmarks. It's about where you've been, the human you've met, how you felt in that trip. And that little piece of fabric or that little memento that you bought has a lot to do with it. When you look back at it many years later, there it is, and it reminds you of that amazing trip. Now, when you travel, it doesn't matter where you go, it looks like airports. When I'm in New Delhi or I'm in New York or I'm in Rio de Janeiro, I have the same shops. If I don't have a lot of money, I have H&M, Zara, whatever on one side. And if I do have a lot more money, then I can buy, the fancy brands on the other side. But really, there's no difference. It's the same brands, look the same way, the hangers are the same, the shops smell the same. And this whole thing about turning the diversity, the joy of travel was being taken away from us. I don't know two human beings who want to dress the same. Whenever I'm a designer, and I remember I used to make dresses for women who would go for weddings, and it was a big drama. All my clients who were going to the same wedding would always tell me, oh, make sure no one else is the wedding is wearing that dress. So why suddenly are we all wanting to dress alike? And why are we accepting this? Why are we wanting not to express who we are when we've always wanted to do that? The other thing that no one talks about, and I was very conscious of, was the fact that we are living in a moment of incredible change. I'm not scared of technology. I'm not a Luddite. In fact, I'm enamored with technology. I'm married to a technologist. My husband works in AI and machine learning. I don't understand most of it. Some of it scares me, but the truth of the matter is it fascinates me. I think technology has always been a tool. Human beings we've invented new technology all through our human history. But every time we've invented something, we can use it two ways. We can use it for it to be really powerful and serve us, or we can use it against each other. And that's where we're at this very moment. I think our leaders, we're lacking incredible leaders at the moment. We're not looking ahead of time, and we're not thinking about the next 10, 20, 30 years. We're going to go through a huge shift. It's very exciting what's happening, but at the same time, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be left behind. And we need to think about those people because they're not connected. The digital divide is getting bigger and bigger every day. What is going to happen? What's going to be the future of work? There's new work being invented every day, and very few people who know how to do it. And there's a lot of work that we've learned for centuries that's going to disappear. When you look at, cars that are going to be without drivers, how many people actually drive cars, are taxi cab riders or truck drivers? What's going to happen to all these human beings? Everyone's trying to tell you the good story. We're going to all live forever and we're going to all look beautiful and it's all eventually going, become part of the general AI. But I do think there's going to be a time, and it's the time that we're living right now, that we need to be really careful with, because this time is a time of change. And a time of change is, human history shows us we've been through it many times. Sometimes we've done it well, and sometimes we've done it horrendously. And the last time, 100 years ago, we did it horrendously. We ended up with 2 world wars. And, we should not take our eye off the ball. We could end up right there. And so for that reason, most of us watching this and being here who have the ability to have food on our table, to be connected, to be able to fend for ourselves, it is our job and it is our responsibility to worry about those that can't, and we need to worry and not leave them behind. Like I said, it's not the first time we've got a disruptive technology that comes into our hands. And of course, you're getting 2 narratives, who hasn't been mesmerized watching Black Mirror and horrified and thinking, oh my God, and The Handmaid's Tale. But at the same time, you've got the, Silicon Valley guys telling you how wonderful technology is going to solve all our problems. And the truth lies somewhere in the middle. You know, you could either have the utopian view or the dystopian view. Utopia or dystopia are not where we're going to get to. They're directions. What we need to do is be very in control of our compass. We need to readjust our compasses. And for that, we need to be honest and brave and sometimes probably think, maybe we've made a mistake. And it's okay to go back a little bit and to wait before we jump, because let me tell you, we're going to go warp speed in the next 20 years. And that's really, really important. So telling you this whole story of with this situation that I was in, that's when I come to IOU and I come to what we were doing. I decided to start a brand called IOU. And the idea with IOU was I was going to use all of this technology and I was going to do my little bit from my little world and try to see how I could turn a problem into an opportunity. What I did was just that. I took technology and connect the person who makes it with the person who consumes. Why? Because I really think that once we do that connection, we change our relationship. We decommoditize product. It's no longer a brand, it's a human story. And human beings were storytellers. It's so important to us. This is how we've always related to each other. What do? I went around the world trying to find raw material with denomination of origin, with great original stories like the Harris Tweed, where they've been doing something on an island and it belongs to that island and it's given work to people for centuries now. And it's given really good, dignified work to them. So I go buy fabric from them, I bring it to the makers in Italy, and that's where we produce. I go to Madras, that's where Madras, you know, this amazing fabric comes from. And I get the fabric from these weavers and get it to Spain and produce alpargatas in Spain. So it's about, with IOU, it was about quality above quantity. And that's been the story of what I've been doing until now. And as a lot of you have heard about IOU, I'm not going to repeat, you can go online and read about it and what we did. We created a code. That code basically got you to see the people who are behind the product. I really believed that with technology, if we could give them identity and authorship, we would completely change the relationships of the people who work as well as of the people who buy the product. And the truth is, it was magical. Just for this little experiment that we did, the result was incredible. We got so many people calling us from all over the world, because not only were we just telling these stories of who made the product, we also connected the people who bought the product to the people who made the product. I think it was really important to make this horizontal instead of a vertical relationship. Which I think transparency was going to bring, and it did bring, was responsibility, shared responsibility. A quick story I'll tell you, which was really amazing for IOU, was that the weavers started to weave slower, not because they were, you know, they get paid more, but really they could be wanting to make more money, but they saw their photograph on the internet. And when I called up to say why they were going slower, they said, well, my picture comes next to the cloth. I want to make sure it's perfect. That's kind of when you realize just giving people a voice, just giving people, you know, the ability to show their work changes things completely. What we did was I started a hashtag in the year 2010, which was Who Made My Clothes? Kenny from Europa. No one gave a damn about it for a couple of years. In 2013, Rana Plaza happened, 1,300 people died, and two really great women, Carrie Summers and Ursula, started a project called Fashion Revolution, and they used the hashtag, and it changed completely. I mean, it became everyone's word. I don't know how to define IOU. I've been asked many times, is IOU a success story? I can tell you I haven't sold $16 million yet. I haven't sold 60 million pieces yet, but last year, 60 million times, that hashtag was shared, and it's not my work, it's shared work. For me, that was what we wanted to do as we started out on this journey, was change people's minds. And I think I'm happy to say that I feel that we've done that. What IOU looks like is a contemporary collection, which is full of fabrics from all over the world. We go right to the artisans. I do more men, well, I do unisex clothing, but I started with menswear, and we're selling in shops, very, very small stores around the world, as well as online in my own store. And we do pop-ups like the one we organized here. I think it's really important to bring craftsmanship back and to tell modern, relevant stories. And with that is when I got into XTANT, and I'm going to let, probably before Adriana talk, and then Marcella can come back and tell you the XTANT story. Thank you so much.